So welcome everybody. I am so excited. Let's see that you joined this webinar. This is Women for Solutions 168th webinar, where we create awareness, where we connect, we learn, we inspire to action to reimagine and regenerate our world. I'm Laura Jaduru-Koch, founder of Women for Solutions, a global network of thousands of women and men, entrepreneur and intrapreneur in over 40 countries that share simple, effective, and scalable solutions towards a caring economy, a system that values key importance in wellness of people and nature. The focus of today's 5th webinar is in the series of The Legacy of Mary Magdalene is based on what has happened for over 300 years with the Cathars in South France and the Templars. For those that have not heard the other 4 webinars, for the last 60 years in Egypt, Turkey, Greece, there have been found authentic text written at that time, 1st and 2nd century, of what was Mary Magdalene's or Jesus Christ's teachings. And today there are reviews of this authentic text that has not been altered, because you know that the Testament, the New Testament, the Old Testament, they have all been re-edited many, many times. So all these original texts have been studied in depth by scholars from Harvard, Stanford, Yale, Princeton University. And today there's a huge number of books that have been written in the last 20 years by many. And so today, our scholar, Teresa Egaña, is passionate about women history, especially the one that has been rarely taught in universities or schools, and about women archetypes. She is founder and CEO of Mujer Wow, international speaker and mentor of Mary Magdalene and her women leadership. She's a therapist, psychologist, a master trainer in international certifications, gender parity in the caring economy through Women for Solutions. She's a non-flick business coach. And we are honored to have Teresa as well as a board member of Women for Solution and passionate about the caring economy. Yeah. So on that, Teresa, the line is all yours.
Thank you very much. I'm again honored with this opportunity to share not only with you, Laura, but with the rest of these women, wonderful women who are curious about another story of leadership, our leadership, and how we understand women. And in order to understand women in a different way than the one that we were taught, it's important to go back to history, and use, for example, Mary Magdalene as an icon of what we women have been going through along the last centuries. Today, we are going to be talking about the Merovingios, ¿cómo se dice Merovingians, Cathars, and Templars, and what came after them, and how that rewrote the story, the history, and how it was again erased, and again it was, let's say, translated into whatever was convenient for politics, society, religion at those times. And nowadays, as Laura mentioned, is being rewritten, re-understood, reinterpreted, thanks to the manuscripts that are still being found in different caves. ¿Cómo se dice cuevas?
Caves.
Different caves in Qumran, Nag Hammadi, Egypt, and other places. So the story starts with King David and his son King Solomon, who were the first kings in Israel who became very much into recovering the love and the cult of the great goddess, woman, divine womanhood, divine feminine.
You have to mention that before there was just one male god, there were women goddesses.
Yes, for 20,000 centuries, the god was a woman, was a female more than a woman, was a feminine energy. And that's why we still call nature Mother Nature, because the first God understood by human beings was the creator of life. And thus we women were very sacred, special beings, very well treated and very well taken care of. So when the Indo-Europeans, who were very much into the patriarchal way of conducting politics and communities, invaded and conquered the let's say Central Europe and the occidental area of Europe, they brought war, imposition, death, conquest. They brought persecutions until they found a way to dominate the presence of the goddess, and it became the companion of the great god male, and then became under the great god male. And then came Abraham, after him Moses, and they established Hebrew, the first monotheist religion, and they managed to disappear the woman, the sacred femininity from the religion.
They absolutely eradicated
Absolutely.
women, and they made it forbidden. They made it toxic. They made it that women were under men.
Yes, almost eradicated, because there was one of the tribes, the Benjamins, who renounced to believe that God was only a male. So they had to leave Israel, the Holy Land. They had to leave it and move to another places north of Italy, south of France, and even crossing to Spain, and stay there safe, and also taking care of Artemis, Athena's, how you call it, in Astarte, as the main goddesses that they were protecting along with Yahweh. And it comes to the truth that Mary Magdalene comes from that tribe, and Jesus comes from David and Solomon. So they both were somehow believers of the feminine presence in divinity. So when they got together as co-leaders, people always think of Mary Magdalene as a poor woman who was, in the feet of Jesus, asking for forgiveness and lost in her mind, crazy mind. But the truth is that Mary Magdalene, and that she is well described in the apocryph Gospels, the lost or hidden Gospels, as a powerful woman, rich, owner of her own fortune. And she comes to Jesus with her brother Lazarus, and they establish this wonderful connection, the power that she already had from the Canaan to Bethania and Jerusalem, thanks to the richness of her father and the power of Jesus. So it was a very powerful connection between two leaders.
Yeah.
Yes. And the thing is that they started a revolution they didn't want to change Judaism. They just wanted to evolve Judaism and recover the presence of the divine femininity, which was represented by Mary Magdalene. And Jesus represented the male divinity. So when he is crucified and she runs away with Jose de Arimathea and Lazarus and the apostle Philip and other apostles and the 30 women apostles that were walking with Jesus, they ran to what we now call South France, because that's where the impure Jewish were living, protecting the presence of the feminine divinity. So she established there the message of the Church of Jesus. And at the same time, Peter, who was against Mary Magdalene, established a church that was a patriarchal. So two churches were created at the same time. According to the Gospels, the Church of Mary Magdalene is the true one, the first one. And they mention Peter as betraying the church that Jesus asked to be created. So, as most of you may know, Peter was crucified with his head down because he admitted that he betrayed Jesus. So he asked to be crucified upside down as a repentant action. So the time passed by, and Paul took Peter's teachings and started creating what it is now understood as the Orthodox Christianism. But meanwhile, the Church of Mary Magdalene was growing so much that the Orthodox Church decided to call that group as Gnostic and then heretical. But they were not only Christians as were called as heretical, also the Jewish were called hereticals. Any Jew who followed the teachings of Christ and Mary Magdalene were called heretical. So persecutions, killings, Constantine came. He established the Orthodox Church as the religion of the Roman Empire. More killings, more persecution. Christian and Jewish were killed, were those who didn't believe in the Orthodox patriarchal religion. They were simply tortured and killed. So by the year, let's say 500.
Can we go a little bit further
Yes.
in history and mention the points? Why were the Cathars so different from the Catholic Church? And one of them was there was a dualism. The Catholic Church believed there was a spiritual principle that was pure good and associated to the divine, and material principle that was evil and corrupt and a source of suffering. And they believe something that you will not understand why it was so undermined in reincarnation. Mary Magdalene and Jesus believed in reincarnation because at that time it was actually something that was very known in that time. And the reason,
common, yes, it was common to believe in reincarnation.
It's very different, the reincarnation of Europe than the one of the Hindus and the Buddhists. We'll go on that later. But the incarnation was so the soul will be continuously revived again and again until it got purified, because the Cathars believe deeply in asceticism, in the practices of renunciation of the material, because they believe in the purification of the soul. And the soul had every human being had a direct contact with God. There was an inner transformation that you connected with God, and that's how you achieved spiritual liberation. And one of those things was, all these things that I mentioned are really against the Catholic Church that was totally monotheistic. They believed deeply in the sacraments that were only able to be done by men, the sacraments of Eucharistia, confession, marriage, and the Trinity. All these sacraments, the religion of love, as Mary Magdalene called it herself, and the Cathars were not really believing in them. And so the Catholic rejected as you know, the reincarnation, and imposed the hierarchy and clergy, meaning the Pope was the vicar of God, and only the clergy, men clergy, that is the archbishops, the priests, and the deacons could have power, could have spiritual powers. And also the Catholic Church institutionalized deep learnings about what was the theory, whilst the Cathars were more open. They believed in several rules about what was that Mary Magdalene and Jesus Christ taught, but they were not so so strict, in the sense that if somebody didn't follow them, they committed heresy and they needed to be killed. So those are the big differences that are key to understand why. And now let's continue, Tere, about.
Yes, but before the Cathars, and to understand how the Cathars existed, why they existed. By the year 500, the empire, the Roman Empire, was already disappeared. It already disappeared, and the Visigoths started their own empire. In them, there were the Merovingians. The Merovingians were the first kings of France, and they were the descendants of Mary Magdalene and Jesus. Let's remember that Mary Magdalene left Jerusalem pregnant, and she gave birth in Alexandria to children, a girl and a boy. And she arrived to South France, to a place that was called Raya, and nowadays called Les Maries de la Mer, the Maries of the sea. And over there, she kept Sarah, and Joseph of Arimathea took the boy to Brittany and Scotland, and they disappeared over there. In fact, if you know a little bit more of history, you will hear that in Scotland, they mention the young Jesus that was there. That young Jesus is the son of Jesus. So from this girl, which is Sarah, she married a high hierarchy person in South France, and the line started to multiply. So the Merovingians are the descendants of that line. Mer, sea, and vine, which is blood, holy blood. The one that came from the sea, Mary Magdalene, and the vine or blood, holy blood, that came from Jesus. So these Merovingian kings were descendants from Mary Magdalene and Jesus. So they again disappear because Charles Magno took over the empire, and he was an Orthodox Christian, again, persecutions and killings. But at the end of the 900s, close to 1000 after Christ, this new community, and it's not new, it's the rebirth of a community in South France that are the followers of the Merovingians and are the followers of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, and they rebirthed the Church of Mary Magdalene. And this church, it's called the Church of Love. It was called from the beginning, just after Jesus died, it was called the Church of Love. So the teachings that the Cathars followed were the same that the Gospels of Mary Magdalene and Thomas and Philip, all those hidden Gospels were wrote to us, and that Constantine and the Orthodox Church decided to forbid and erase from the earth, but they were hidden and they were found. So now we know that the Cathars were following the original message and teachings of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, the Church of Love, which was Gnostic, and that presented all that Laura just told. So this community started to grow with so much power and so much love, because love is power, and it's the most powerful feeling and medicine that there is for human beings. So people all over the world started to come to the Cathars as a refugee, as a place to be free, to be capable of living with dignity, whether they were men and women. And the Cathars, along with Laura shared, they were extremely respectful to women. Women were priestesses, they were political influence, they were judges, they were teachers, they were independent, they could have sex with whomever they wanted. I mean, they were not only following the message of Magdalene and Jesus in the beginning, but also the way that that communities used to live when the goddess was the only one in their hearts. Okay, so at that moment, the Catholic Church called the Cathars as heretics, especially because women were free and powerful, and they could marry and divorce and have children with whomever they wanted, and they could have sex with whomever they wanted, and they called this immoral. They
imagine if you were
I think it's
respected. Why not?
Yes, but the Catholic Church couldn't understand that. But what few people mention is that the Church of the Hebrew didn't accept that either. I mean, it was not only the Orthodox Christianity, but also the Orthodox Judaism. So they both together went against this rebirth of the original message of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, because of course it would ¿cómo se dice? Destronar.
Dethrone or
dethrone, yeah, the Pope and the men in the beliefs of divinity and the power, the clerical power over the countries, the communities, and the hearts of people, mind and hearts of people. So along with the Cathars, let's say 100 years later, started a new organization of clerical soldiers. They presented themselves in front of the Pope as sacred soldiers who were going to protect the pilgrims that moved from Europe to the Holy Land. And they were, some say 7, some say 9 men who were very rich, who were highly educated, who were very, very trained as soldiers. And they said to the Pope that they were going to protect the pilgrims, only them, from one place to another, which is basically impossible. But the Pope thought that it was a great idea. So these men, the one that created them was Bernard du Clairvaux, and he was a Frenchman, and he was a follower, a friend of the Cathars. But this was not open to the eyes of the Catholic Church. So Bernard created this new organization, and this organization had a hidden mission. and that was to recover the Holy Grail. And the Holy Grail in French is translated into the Holy Blood, the Saint Grail. The Saint Grail is the Holy Blood. And that translated into going to the temple of, or what it was left of the temple of Solomon, where very close was supposed to be buried Jesus and Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene died in South France, and her body was, part of her body was transported to Jerusalem, and other parts of the body stayed in France. So they wanted to rescue these los restos,
Remains.
the remains of their bodies, and also the lost ark, which says that contains the truth of Jesus, his truth, the true message. This lost ark was never found, but the remains of Jesus and Mary Magdalene is still being under consideration by scientists who are trying to prove whether they are or they are not the remains of Jesus of Mary Magdalene. And we're talking 1,000 years after, still this discussion on. So the Templars and the Cathars had something in common, and that's the belief of Mary Magdalene and Jesus as co-leaders and as couple, and also the creators of a new line of blood, or bloodline, that it was sacred. They both believed that not only Jesus was divine, a human divine representation of God, but Mary Magdalene was a human and divine representation of God too. And if we see this, then we can understand that when Catholics say, or Christians say, that God has his son sitting in his right hand, then we can understand that in his left hand is sitting his daughter. And this God, like Laura said, is not male or female, it's both mother and father, or father and mother, both. And this was very difficult for the Catholic to accept, along with other Christians. So the Templars began to grow, and more people began to get together with them, and Cathars were becoming bigger and bigger and more powerful. And suddenly the church said, this is just too much of a risk. They are threatening our existence. People are beginning to connect with them and disconnect from us. We have to kill them. At that time, the first crusade already happened, and the second too. And the first was a success. This first crusade was guided by the Templars. And the Templars were representing, listen to this, they were representing one of the, or the main heredero?
Heirs.
Heir of the Merovingian kings, that is Godofredo de Bouillon. And he was called the true king of Jerusalem, because he had the sacred blood of Jesus and Magdalene. So the Templars and the Crusades won back again Israel, or the Holy Land. And this man, Godofredo de Bouillon, became the first king of Jerusalem of that time. And then his nephew, and then another one. And the Second Crusade failed to keep Jerusalem safe from the Arabs and lost the land. So these kings and his descendants were expelled from Jerusalem, and the Templars came back to Europe with the failed Crusaders. So at that moment, they decided to become more powerful, to go back to Jerusalem and win Jerusalem again. But the Pope, the present Pope at that time, and the king of the north of France decided to get together and to both kill not only the Cathars, but also the Templars. So in a third crusade, a crusade against the Christian and the Cathar Christians and the Templars, they erased them from France, but some could run to Spain and then to Portugal. When they were in Spain, then the crusade disappeared and came the Inquisition. The Inquisition followed them and killed them. All the Templars they could in Spain. So a group of them, and we're talking already in 1400 after Christ, they ran to Portugal. And if we understand the name of Portugal, it's called Port-u-Gal, the port of Grail. The Portugal takes the name of the port of the Grail, Portugal. And the Templars became very powerful there, along with the acceptance of the King of Portugal. And then the Inquisition negotiated with the 3 generations after this king, and they together decided to expel the Templars from the Portugal. And then after that, some say that they moved to the North America, Canada, south of Canada, and north of North America. So the supposed to be treasure of the Cathar and the supposed to be treasure of the Templars is basically the Holy Grail or the Holy Blood, which is the truth of the descendants of Mary, Magdalene, and Jesus. This is very difficult to understand by the Christian and Jewish that are very orthodox in their beliefs, because it not only changes the presence and the power and leadership of women in religion, politics, and society and economy, but also Jesus. It understands Jesus as a man who was married, who had sex, and who is a father, is the opposite of what the Jewish and the Christian have been taught about him. So this is very, this is a pressure that many people, is like too much. I recall my mother listening to my speeches and my sharings about this story, and she once asked me why the church lied to us. And I said, 1, because they need men to overpower women, and 2, because it changes the understanding of Jesus, not only of women and Mary Magdalene, but about Jesus. It's a whole different message. It's a whole different way to connect to God. It's a whole different way to understand God itself. So it's not Mary Magdalene and women. It's not only Jesus. It's not only religion. It's God itself. Whether she, he, whatever, is a complete different way to understand God.
Key thing here that is so important is that for the Cathars and the Templars, there was an inner transformation, and that inner transformation connected you to God. And that freedom of choice, freedom of liberation was such a contrast with the Catholic Church and all the other Christian sects that came after, because it really annihilated the sense, the importance of men under women, where they became equal, and the authority, meaning, remember, in the Middle Ages, you have the authority of the king came from God, the authority from the Pope came from God. The divine right of king was such an important concept that Mary, the religion of love of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, totally opposed it. And so basically all these kings had no rights to have power over their people. And so, and then again, reincarnation was another issue that was like non-accepted by the Catholic Church, because then it didn't justify the sin, the concept of sinners. And well, I think that's an amazing. We have a few more minutes left. And
yes, because basically the religion, the Jewish religion of Jesus and Mary Magdalene was about, again, evolving monotheism and understanding God, not the God that the Old Testament is draw, but a compassive God, male, female, mother and father, a God that forgives, a God that embraces, a God that is pure love. And that has nothing to do with a God that became angry when Eve took the fruit from the forbidden tree and condemned Eve and Adam from to a life of pain and war and shame. So it was a revolutionary way to understand divinity, that the origins were the goddesses, the goddess, the female god. So understanding all this means that the Church of Love teaches nowadays to be compassive, to be forgiving, to embrace people from different kind of past, colors, ways of being, which now we call inclusion, and to understand men and women as we now call parity, and to understand religion as we now call compassion. So what we are now on understanding of human beings and a better world is pretty much is the beginning of understanding the true message of Mary Magdalene and Jesus. And that means that we now are getting more and more ready to receive the true teachings and to understand that, and this comes from the Gospels of Mary Magdalene, that we don't have to reincarnate. She says to Jesus, I had a vision. I saw that we could connect to the highest level of our soul and direct connection to divinity in one same life by 8 different steps that she called them fruits. The fruits of the forbidden tree? No, the fruit of the sacred tree that was original in the paradise. So she says, I saw these 7 fruits, and number 8 is the total connection with God in ourselves. And Jesus answered to her, blessed you are that you could see that and believe in that and can say it to me. Now that's the teaching that you have to teach to others. And this gospel, these teachings are in the Mary Magdalene Gospels. So it's wonderful how everything changes and how nowadays we are ready to understand that and maybe ready to accept that. Not only understand, but also accept that.
And you can mention that you will be giving these 4 classes on the Mary Magdalene Gospel in the...
Yes.
So
the 4th of October, I will start a training, not a training, no. We'll start a WhatsApp group where I will, during 4 weeks, will be teaching about Mary Magdalene's Gospel and the 8 fruits of connecting with the sacredness. And in fact, the trip that we are going to do to Israel in February next year is following these 8 fruits and these steps in Israel, in Holy Land, and also the life of Mary Magdalene before and during Christ. So it's going to be in Spanish, the WhatsApp group, If you speak Spanish, you're very welcome to be part of it. It's free. It's a gift from me to you. So you can be part of it whenever you want. You can find it in Instagram, the link to be part of it. Okay.
What we could mention here is that when we talk about the religion of love, that is the concepts of love, respect, is this movement of empathy, of compassion, of inner transformation towards the divinity. We see that same line of thought in the Gnostic Christians, the mystical Christians, the troubadours and the ministers in northern and middle and center of France. Also the Bhakti movement in India, that is totally unrelated to Mary Magdalene, but they have the very similar concept of devotion and love towards and the Sufism and the New Age spirituality. All these
and the Messianic Jewish, the Messianic Jewish. I mean, the group of Jewish that believe in Jesus.
Yeah. So it's fascinating that these principles that were so strong in the at the beginning of the century, that were really bringing forward an opening of consciousness of humans, rather than connecting with suffering, with greed, with all the negative evilness of our dark side. So we have 2,000, 3,000 years of all this that needs to be expiated in ourselves. And I think that these new movements, not only these movements that about Mary Magdalene, the resurgence of her leadership, and all these other new faiths of love and connection, direct connection with inner transformation, all these are leading us all to a better world. And I always say this is the epiphany to move towards a more caring economy, because if we internally can't have that connection with a divinity or be spiritual and less materialistic as the church actually made us, or the Roman Empire put that as our roots, I truly believe that we have a possibility of moving forward towards a better economy.
For sure. And if we follow these messages, it's inevitable. I mean, we will have a different mindset, a different way to relate to others, not only to other human beings, but to life itself, to nature, to the planet, because then we understand that we are systemic part of everything, and that God is in everywhere. Jesus used to say to the pagans and the Jewish that follow him, take one stone and under it you will find me, which means that divinity and this message of love is everywhere. Marie Magdalene never asked to be the popist of her church. She just spread the word. And Merovingians and Cathars and Templars, they were not looking to be the popes. They were just looking to spread a different message about Jesus and Mary Magdalene, and thus Christianity and Judaism. So it's not about hierarchy, that it could be, it maybe is needed, but it's more about my rightfulness, my place, my right to connect to divinity as much as any man. Women have a place in divinity, and that changes our place in life itself. So, do you have any question? Will any one of you would like to share something or ask something? Because you do, just you have to turn on your microphone and we can listen to you. Susie or Carmelina or Marcia or Patricia.
You know, I have a question for you.
Okay.
My question to you is there any difference between the religion of love that Mary Magdalene professed and the one of the Gnostic Christians? Because our next webinar, number 6, will be about Gnostic Christianity and the way they dealt with religion and the concept of Mary Magdalene and Jesus.
Okay, my answer will be yes and no. Okay, yes, they were both Gnostic. The origin and Gnosticism of Gnosticism is Mary Magdalene. The name was created 100 years later to understand Orthodox and Gnostics, so they could understand both sides of the same story. The Gnostics are the followers of Mary Magdalene teachings. Now, the Gnostics, years after, 60, 80 years after Mary Magdalene, had new leaders who were men, mostly men. Some were women, but most of them were men. Valentine was one of them. And people started to say Valentine's Gnosticism. So that became, Gnosticism started to spread into different kind of Gnosticism, as well as Christianity has different ways of expressing the Christianity. Catholics is one of them. It's not the only one, it's one of them. So the Arians were also Gnostic, and so the Jewish Christians, followers of Mary Magdalene, were Gnostics. Mary Magdalene was Gnostic, but that name appeared years after she was gone. Okay, but the next time, the next month, we can go into that. One thing before we leave. After the Templars came other organizations that were the protectors of the Holy Grail, or the true message of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. Yo te voy a decir los nombres en español.
Okay.
Rosacruces.
The Rosacruces. Rosacruces, they are called like that.
Okay. Priorato de Sion.
The Order of Zion.
Y los masones.
And the Masons.
Those
were all followers, and they all had these very secret ways of creating their own religion. They were very, very, very esoteric, as the Christian call them, in interpretation of what they did.
Thank you. The word esoteric is a way of saying Gnostic. Okay. It's a new way to call Gnostics. So, but let's say, for example, it was very powerful at one time, the Rosacruces. Rose, Mary Magdalene, she was represented by several symbols. One of them was the rose. Cruz, or the crucify, Jesus. The cross, Jesus. So the Rosacruces, they represent Mary Magdalene and Jesus. The Priorato, the Order of Sion, they represent Mary Magdalene and Jesus. Masons or Masones, they do too, but they have changed a lot. Yeah. But at the beginning, they were protectors of the Holy Grail.
Yeah, and you know who was belonged to the Order of Sion was Leonardo da Vinci.
Yes.
Last Supper, he painted Mary Magdalene right beside Jesus, and some people say no, it's a man that looks more like a woman. No, it's Mary Magdalene, and so there's always been a lot of controversy there, but he was definitely a believer in that. And you have also Dante Alighieri, who talks about the 7 circles of towards divinity, or the circles towards the Inferno. And he also believed in Mary Magdalene's teachings, but it was all taboo, and only in very hush and totally secret ways these esoteric experiences were connected with were done, but very, very, because they would risk their lives if discovered.
Ok, ¿cómo se dice la piedad? La escultura de...
The piety, the sculpture of Michelangelo, no?
Ajá, la piedad.
Where he holds the piety, yeah.
Well, people are taught to see that as Mary, the mother of Jesus, holding Jesus. But the original sculpture had a Cupid, the angel of love and sensuality. And this Cupid was turned down from the sculpture.
Was taken.
Was taken away from the sculpture, because the true sculpture was Mary Magdalene holding her husband Jesus, and the Cupid represented the loved ones, the lovers. And the church said, no way. So they lo destruyeron.
They erased
they turned it down.
Cupid from the Pietà.
And if you get the chance to see the original sculpture, you will see that something is broken, something is missing. And that missing part is Cupid. And that missing part means that it's not Mary the mother, but Mary Magdalene the wife holding her husband. So there are many things in life, especially by artists, that will tell us this story. But let's talk more about that next time, because the time is over. Time's over. And we'll get together next month.
Yeah,
right?
well, thank you very much to everybody. And our next webinar is October 27th at noon, again on a Friday. And we will focus on Mary Magdalene and the 1st and 2nd century Gnostics.
Yes.
Belief of knowledge.
Gracias, Patricia.
Gracias. ¿Cuántas cosas que no se saben?
Sí.
Oh,
Yeah, it's all about the history is written by the winners.
The men.
Sí, hay una canción que lo dice así.
Yes.
La historia.
So let's write history.